Alright everyone, so this is kind of a special video. I've searched online before making this video about any additional information than what I could find. And yeah, I can't really find anything. There's no videos on YouTube about this controller or anything. But the reason why this controller is kind of special, even though, I'll just be honest with you, it's not a particularly good controller. It's actually a really terrible controller. But apart from that, what makes this controller really special is that this is one of the only official third-party accessories. And I say official in quotes, but it was one of the only companies that actually made a third-party accessory for the Atari Jaguar. Yes, the Jaguar with the infamous number pad keypad on the controller that a lot of people like to make fun of. And I'll be honest with you, if you're a hardcore Jaguar player, try to get these Pro controllers because they're much better. The D-pad's really nice on these things. You got proper face buttons and shoulder buttons. And of course, it leaves the number pad on there for compatibility reasons. But this is a third-party controller. Now, because you just saw the Pro controller, you've noticed, like, wait a minute, there's no number pad. How will it work with the games? From the information I found, it seems like I'm kind of assuming this controller wasn't really officially sold, even though it was in Poland. So it was produced in Poland, but it wasn't really released. Let's just say it that way. And I think part of the reason why is that maybe they realized, like, oh, there are actually some games that actually do have to use the number pad, and this controller won't really work for those games. So there's like a compatibility issue with this controller. And yes, the Jaguar will actually see this controller. I've actually tested it out. It is actual Jaguar port on it. If I grab my Pro controller, for example, if you compare the two, this is the official one and here's the third-party version. If you look at the two, exact same pinout, exact same styling, it's the exact same plug. So, it does work, but it is questionable with certain games, because there are some games that actually do have to utilize the number pad, and because this controller doesn't have it, it won't work with some games. And maybe that's why this controller wasn't really officially released. And part of the reason why I kind of guessed that is the packaging itself. Now keep in mind, this is brand new. Now the box is in a little bit of a rough shape, but if you look in the back here, you can kind of tell that they use a standard packaging for multiple systems. Well, they never list one officially for the Jaguar console. Someone just wrote in Jaguar B-701, which is, if you're wondering, this is the Boomerang B-701. But there was no official markings on there. So the way the way they would, now of course this is in Poland here, so I can't really read this stuff, but this controller was actually designed, they basically used the same molding for multiple different systems. So depending on the console, they're going to silk screen the different button configurations and the button configurations would match with what the console is set up for. So, if I kind of hold this up closely, I don't know how well you'll be able to see that. But you're going to see there are different model numbers. So B101, B102, B103. Those are mainly for the Amigas, Atari, Commodore, Grid, TV, IP, or FP. Or TP, I have no idea what that is. This one here is like for the IBM PC. Here's a Nintendo Pegasus 502. I have actually no idea what that is. There's one for Sega, so I'm assuming this one was mainly for the Sega Genesis, since you can kind of tell this looks like a 3-button Sega Genesis controller. Now that we got that type of information, I can kind of understand why this wasn't really released. Granted, this was only released in Poland, or it was manufactured in Poland at least. The quality is really not all that great, to be honest with you. The plastic feels really, really cheap. I don't know how well the camera's going to pick up. If I try to shine some light on the controller itself, you're going to see like these little indentations on there. So it seems like they used some really thin plastic, or thin enough to be cheap, but not too thin that would just kind of break when you're holding it. But I can kind of squeeze control, and it's like I can kind of feel there are some give with the plastic. So it's not a particularly well-made controller. Even the molding on here is kind of off. Like the bottom part here kind of sticks out more, so if you're like rubbing your finger across here, it's not exactly like this side is smooth, but this side is not. And it's not just from this controller, it's actually, based on the research I've done from other models of the controllers for the other systems, it's the exact same issue. So obviously the mold they use wasn't exactly correct. The D-pad, it's supposed to feel like a Sega Genesis controller, but not quite. These face buttons here are really, really terrible. I'm not going to lie. They're really, really stiff. Especially the C button here. It actually takes quite a bit of effort to press this down. I'm really surprised. Like, when they're designing this controller and they're like testing it out, it's like, did they not test this? It's kind of weird. And like the pause button, it's kind of like flush with like the top part of this molding, and then you kind of have to like dig your finger inside there. It's not exactly pleasant to press in there. Then the option button is kind of sticking out some. Like the B button feels okay at best. The A button, they're about the same, but this C button's really stiff. And the D-pad, when you're just holding this controller, it just feels really, really cheap. Now, there's a cool thing about this. These little green things here. Now, if you notice, this D-pad has this little hole on here. Now, if you're a fan of like the Sega Master System, for example, you're gonna kind of know what I'm getting at here. You got these little attachments that you can kind of attach to the D-pad. So this round one, makes the D-pad rounded. For some reason, I don't know why that would make this a better experience, but it's like, okay, let's do that, see what happens. Now, of course, I haven't really used these things all that much, so I'm not entirely sure of the quality or how long those things will last. But what I will say is that it is all plastic in there. So if you are kind of rough on it, you might break it. But it does actually wrap around the D-pad itself. So at least it will give some structure there. So I don't think you're going to break it too easily unless you're just really that rough with it. Now the one that I actually do kind of like is this part here, because this actually makes it into like a traditional joystick. So if you pop that on there, you got a more of a traditional type of joystick. So you can kind of like play it like this here, or just have your thumb like this. And at least this way, it does make the D-pad feel better, because you're not kind of like digging in there. Because for some reason, it kind of feels like you're digging in there. So I can see something like this working better. But yeah, I'll be honest with you, overall, stick to the D-pad. It's the original Jaguar controllers. or if you're like a hardcore Jaguar player like myself, you can spend the extra money for a Pro controller, which these are actually really good controllers. But yeah, let me connect this to the Jaguar, and let's try testing out some games with it. Now I know normally I can do actual capturing, but for this purpose, I want to make sure I, have the controller in the shot. But one thing I will say, this cord. By the way, this cord actually is not too bad. It's a thin cord, but it's not one of those types of cords like so stiff that just get all bind up. It's actually a pretty nice loose cord. So I'll give it props for that. But the cord is so freaking short. I mean, if you've been watching my channel, you kind of know where the system is at. Like right about here, it's at full length. It's only 1, 2, 3, 4. The cord's only about 5-6 feet long. Not exactly long, I have to say. But what I'm going to test out on is Breakout 2000. Whoa. Okay, I can already see one thing wrong. I don't recall that happening with the official Jaguar controller. So just to test it out, let me plug my Pro controller in here and see if it does the same thing. Just take that off, because I don't remember it doing that. Yeah, it's not doing that. So I'm like holding it. It only changes when I actually do let go of the D-pad. So let me get the Boomerang back on. Yeah, I can already see an issue with that. So yeah, I'm using the D-pad to go back and forth like that. Oh yeah, this D-pad is really not that great. Oops. Okay, so let me try like this little attachment here, and let me see if that actually does make an improvement. And of course, I think I lost. Oh no, okay. Okay, now I'm on the top apparently. Yeah, this D-pad is terrible. Oh my god, this is a terrible controller. Okay. So just for... I'm actually going to make sure I actually do play... Okay. Yeah, this is not a very responsive D-pad. Now, to be fair, maybe I have to actually take this apart and maybe clean the contacts, because keep in mind, this was never used. So depending on how this controller is stored, you know, maybe there's some corrosion in the contacts. I mean, it kind of works, but let's try a game that actually might utilize like the number pad, for example. Alright, so let's try Skyhammer. Because I know Skyhammer uses the number pad quite a bit for some of the stuff. Yeah, this is something. Yeah, for some reason the way they designed the D-pad, it doesn't exactly stop. So trying to use the D-pad for games like this, kind of a pain in the ass.
System active.
Thank you. Please call again.
Oh wow. Yeah, this is really hard to play. Let me try taking... See, I had this thing on, and yeah, I wasn't really doing it. So let me try it. Actually, you know what? Just for kicks, let me try this little nub here. So I'll try playing like this. Oh my god. No, that's... Let me take that off. Yeah, this is a terrible controller. Oh my god. Oh my god, this controller sucks. This is terrible. And I died. So yeah, this is not a very good controller. This is actually a terrible controller. So yeah, that's a overview of the Boomerang controller. B-701 is a third-party controller for the Atari Jaguar. And you know what? Maybe for kicks, I'll take this apart and see how it looks like inside. Oh, one more thing. With this controller, you cannot reset the system. So you can't actually reset the console. What? A third-party controller that you can't do basic functions like that. Because even though the console itself relies on a reset button, you can actually do a reset by holding down the pound and star and option. That resets, or no. You actually just hold down both of them and actually just resets the console. You can't do that with this controller. So yeah, this is kind of a fail, if you ask me. So I decided to keep the main theme song for Skyham in the background just for kicks. But I've taken the screws out, and I have to say those are some really piss poor quality screws. Yeah. Let's take that out. This is how the inside looks, which is pretty much molded after the 3-button Sega Genesis controller. Alright, so we got that there. And let's take a look at this. Interesting design, I have to say. I haven't actually seen something like this before. So this is the D-pad. Has a little spring inside there. Pop that out. And you got the D-pad. These buttons here. Of course, you got one of these things here. So let's take a look at this. Really weird design, I have to say. Now, it kind of explains why the buttons are so stiff. The way these things are designed. Yeah, it's really weird. This part, okay, so that actually kind of makes sense now. That's why the D-pad feels so weird. It's on a slight angle. Huh. Never realized that. Let me slap this on here real quick. Okay. Then that actually does kind of make sense how they designed that. So the board, you know, kind of like sits like this. Huh. Really weird. So if you want a close look at this, really weird design, I have to say. Because normally with older consoles, a lot of times these rubber things kind of just sits there. But these actually have these little metal clips that holds it down in place. So you're not really relying on the buttons themselves to keep it in place. You got this thing here. Never seen that before. My question is, when they were designing this controller, why didn't they use these clear ones for these? Because these are way too stiff compared to these clear ones. These clear ones actually feels pretty good. These are really stiff. They feel terrible. But yeah, that's how it looks like on the inside. And if you're wondering about the chips, those are the chips. Looks like there's some I'm not really too familiar with chips in general, but I know like those are resistors. And I'm going to assume this is like the little memory bank of every time you press a button, it tells the chip, okay, it does this command. So my guess is how they design these controllers for multiple systems is they basically use the exact same platform, same molding and everything. Of course, they would just silk screen the front for different things, but they would just change out the chip or program the chip for a particular system. That's my guess. And of course, depending on which system they're using it for, it will have the correct plug for it. That's my guess of how they designed this thing. But yeah, overall, this is a terrible controller. Unless you're like a hardcore collector and you miraculously somehow find one, I don't recommend you at all picking this controller up. It's really not worth it. So that's pretty much it. Like always, have a good one. Like this video, leave comments down below. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Share this video, you know, if you know anyone that's big into old school Atari systems or a Jaguar, and this will actually be kind of a cool video to watch. Anyway, like always, have a good one.